In this video, we are going to create a database connector. Database connectors in Warewolf consume stored procedures and functions in your database server, so you can use them to either read or update your database tables. You will need to have access to a Microsoft SQL server. We use the standard AdventureWorks database in this example. You will need to recreate this stored procedure in your AdventureWorks database to complete this exercise. The SQL looks like this. We will demonstrate how to select data using a stored procedure and use it in a Warewolf microservice. We are going to use this stored procedure to return a list of players for a game. To start, create a new service by clicking the New Service button in the toolbar. Scroll down in the toolbox until you find the database category. Drag the SQL Server tool onto the design surface and connect it to the Start node. It should look like this. Click the New button to create a new database source. On the New Database Source tab, add your server and select Authentication Type as Windows. Now click Test Connection. Assuming this is successful, you will be able to select your AdventureWorks database from the drop-down menu. Your new database source should look like this. Click the Save icon in the left-hand menu and save your source as AdventureWorks. We have just created our first database source. You will find it in the Explorer. Now navigate back to your service and open the SQL Server Database tool. From the Source drop-down list, select the AdventureWorks source. After you have selected the source, select the Action List menu. The action list becomes populated with all of the stored procedures in your database. If you are working on the database at the same time, you can click the Refresh button to refresh the list. It is important to note at this point that the Warewolf server is actually making the connection to the database server, so your Warewolf server must be able to access the SQL database server. We are going to use the dbo.fetchPlayers stored procedure, so select it from the action list. Now we want to add a variable called number of players. This allows us to pass in the variable at runtime. Type in number of players with brackets in the Input Data variable field. Now it's time to fetch players using the Generate Outputs button. In the Game Number field, add the number of players you want to fetch. We will use 4. Then click Test. You should see a list of 4 players in the Output section. Now click Done. You will notice the record set name in the Variables list. In the Variables list, mark number of players as input and dbo fetch players as output. Now let's debug this service. You can add any number of inputs in the debug window in the number of players input box, but we will use 4 again. Then click Debug. If you look at the output box, you will see the inputs of number of players is 4, and the outputs are the same as the outputs that you selected earlier in the variables list. You can also view this in your browser by using the shortcut key F7. Your browser will now display the XML dataset that you have flagged as output variables. It is time to save your microservice. Click the Save button on the toolbar. Name your new microservice Fetch Players Service. We've just built our first microservice that returns data from a database.